So, when we talk about cellular health or health in general or the functioning of the human body, it's often through the lens of biochemistry, meaning this molecule, this hormone, this protein, right? And all of those things are important because the human body does have a biochemistry as an operational system. However, the biochemistry requires adequate charge or voltage or any energy or electricity in order to actually be operational. It's like saying, I want to run this and run that and run that, but not have the battery power to do it. And so the battery power is something I want to about with you today, specifically through the lens of mitochondrial health and how mitochondrial health can improve our overall cellular bioelectric voltage and energy status. So, there's a growing research that really indicates that mitochondria are very central to maintaining what we would call healthy cellular voltage. This cellular voltage has been called a lot of things, and I've talked about this previously. It has sometimes been referred to as an alkaline environment. Sometimes it's referred to as a membrane potential. And today I want to talk about two actual quote unquote membrane potentials and how they influence each other and how water comes into play. So first and foremost, inside of the mitochondria, there is this thing called the electron transport chain. And this electron transport chain pumps protons across this inner membrane of the mitochondria. So picture mitochondria, and this mitochondria has an outer membrane and an inner membrane. And in that inner membrane, there's this electron transport chain that's embedded inside of it. And with certain steps of the electron transport chain, you can essentially pump a proton into the space between the inner and outer membrane. And what happens here is you build up this proton concentration in this space that's called the inner membrane space. It almost is like you blow up a balloon. You increase this gradient or this potential. And this gradient of proton buildup drives both water and ATP production. And this proton gradient is termed mitochondrial membrane potential. So we need a very healthy mitochondrial membrane potential in order to drive both water and ATP synthesis. And when mitochondria can make water, so this part of this, what this proton gradient does is that hydrogen is able to, that gradient is able to help to drive water production at step 4 of the mitochondrial electron transport chain. And this water production, then remember that water that's produced in the mitochondria, it's a very healthy metabolic water. And when it comes into contact with a biological surface, it becomes easy water or exclusion zone water. And that water holds a charge of its own. So essentially, by really improving the mitochondrial membrane potential or this voltage that the mitochondria hold, we improve water and ATP production in the cell, both of which do contribute to both the production of this exclusion zone water and its maintenance. ATP helps to maintain it specifically around proteins inside of the cell. So this is very key for cellular operations. And unfortunately, a lot of things that we'll talk about several things that disrupt mitochondrial function. But then there's a connection now to this mitochondria having a healthy membrane potential or healthy voltage, and the outside of the cell having a healthy membrane or a healthy voltage. And so it's been shown that as the mitochondria drain or don't have that healthy voltage in their membrane, the cellular membrane also loses voltage. And the cellular membrane, or it's called the plasma membrane, these things can be let's put it this way, when the mitochondrial voltage drops, and that can drop due to several things. Anything that causes what's called oxidative stress in the mitochondria. So these days, a lot of that oxidative stress comes from toxins. It can come from artificial light exposure. And those toxins can be both toxins from the outside that we take in, such as glyphosate, fluoride, heavy metals. It can be toxins that that can be produced inside of our bodies through various opportunistic infections, or it can be another toxin that a lot of people don't consider, which is non-native electromagnetic fields. All of those things can cause the mitochondrial voltage to drop. And when like I said, when the mitochondrial voltage drops, the cell membrane loses its healthy charge. When a cell membrane doesn't have healthy charge, you actually change its permeability, meaning you change the ability of things to go in and out of the cell, which can lead to cellular toxicity. When all the voltage drops as well, and the mitochondria become dysfunctional, those mitochondria can become so dysfunctional that the cell has to revert to an alternative metabolism. So instead of using the electron transport chain to be able to make this healthy water, healthy ATP, the cells will revert to an alternative pathway, which is almost like a survival pathway. It's not the main pathway that they're designed to run. They're designed to run this in very short bursts if needed. And that's called a Warburg metabolism. And the Warburg metabolism hoards a bunch of glucose to make very little ATP and practically no water. But like I said, this is like the survival metabolism. Unfortunately, this metabolism is also the hallmark of cancer cells and also cells that are involved in things like autoimmunity. So it really is essential to understand how to maintain healthy mitochondria, how to maintain this healthy membrane potential, healthy cellular voltage. And like I said, unfortunately, most mainstream research is talking about things like potassium pumps, sodium pumps, those sorts of things for maintaining it. And I believe that it's been completely overlooked that the water itself has a negative charge. Before, decades ago, before they knew that the water inside the cell was responsible for holding voltage or holding energy, they had to think, okay, well, what other alternative means could there be for holding voltage in a cell? And they, hypothesized that it might be the fact that we pump potassium in and we pump sodium out, and it's this difference in sodium and potassium ratios on the interior and exterior of the cell that maintains this voltage gradient or this charge differential. And it turns out that it's highly likely that the water plays a huge role here. So what can we do to maintain this water production? What can we do to maintain healthy mitochondria? We go back to some pretty foundational things when it comes to this stuff. So number one, morning sunlight is essential. Those mitochondria love morning sunlight because it's full of red and infrared light, which help to maintain mitochondrial water and ATP production. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But it also sets our circadian rhythm. And mitochondria are dependent on our circadian rhythm in order to be best at producing water and ATP. When our circadian rhythm is dysfunctional, they become more dysfunctional. The other thing is the reason morning is key. And if you cannot get morning light, I highly encourage you to get morning red and near infrared light. So that specific wavelength range that you can find in things like a red light therapy panel, sauna space bulbs, those types of things. And that's because there's some really new research indicating that if we can precondition our mitochondria with red and near infrared light, only in the morning does this work. So essentially we shine red and near infrared light on our mitochondria in the morning, we see improved health outcomes that are dependent on improved mitochondrial health. So for example, we're seeing improvements in eyesight, we're seeing improvements in blood glucose regulation. And remember, those mitochondria take the electrons and protons from that glucose, and they use that to run what's called oxidative phosphorylation or healthy mitochondrial metabolism. So being better able to tolerate glucose even in a typical office environment that's full of blue light that can be very harmful to mitochondria, full of non-native EMFs that can also be harmful to mitochondria. There's something really powerful about giving the mitochondria these wavelengths of light that they need in the morning prior to those exposures that can help them maintain healthy function and resilience. Now, how do the mitochondria do that? Well, mitochondria actually have ways to absorb light energy. Specifically, step 4 of the mitochondrial electron transport chain has key copper residues, if you will, that absorb red and near infrared light. So it's not just like this, oh, shine light on the body and we don't know what happens, all is well. Turns out that likely step 4 is absorbing it, and also the water in and around the mitochondria also absorb that red and near infrared energy in order to optimize flow, optimize efficiency. So great strategy right there. There's other things that I talk about a lot as well that are very important, like earthing and grounding to increase mitochondrial electron flow, redox status, or the ability to clear inflammation in a cell. Cold exposure, which I talked all about during my Prep for Winter challenge, can go a long way to increase mitochondrial efficiency and voltage efficiency as well. So lots of key strategies that we don't really think of when it comes to health, because for us, health is synonymous, at least for me, especially back in the day. All I thought of when it came to health was what am I eating and what type of exercise am I doing? And certainly a nutrient-rich diet matters because mitochondrial health also runs on adequate amounts of B vitamins, CoQ10, magnesium, those types of things. But it's not the entire picture. And then we can layer in the whole concept of drinking high quality structured water. We can layer in the concept of molecular hydrogen and all of those things that can also improve mitochondrial health and mitochondrial efficiency so that we can maintain this healthy cellular voltage, therefore this healthy cellular function. So all of it comes into play in this very cool way when we look at the body through the lens of voltage, through the lens of mitochondrial water production, bioelectric bodies, that type of concept. And I've really, really loved viewing health through that standpoint because to me, it's very empowering. And there are some very simple health strategies that we can do on a daily basis to help maintain the body's optimum health through this lens.